Before we start, I would just like to give a big thank you to MARKIE for sponsoring today's video. Right, so it has been a while since we spoke about iilluminaughtii on this channel, and I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody that she's still up to her old tricks. And more specifically, we're going to be talking about this ongoing lawsuit that is happening between Blair, the plaintiff, and the defendants, OZMedia, Wonderstruck, and Felix the Kit Kat for some reason. I mean, the fact that any of them are having to defend themselves in court is baffling to me, but especially Felix the Kit Kat. He did, like, literally nothing. So let me give you a list of the things we're going to cover in this video, and first of all, let me just say it's a big thanks to MARKIE. All credit goes to him. I've mentioned him a few times on this channel. I really do enjoy his videos. I would highly recommend any of you to go and check out his videos, subscribe to his channel. He is an actual lawyer. He knows a lot more about this stuff than I do, so I would highly recommend him. But the things we are going to cover in this video is that Oz actually filed a motion to dismiss, which, I mean, should be pretty obvious, right? Because Blair's claims are absolutely mental. We also have Blair's response to this motion to dismiss. We then have the court's response, which is basically telling Blair to actually say some facts and give some evidence. And then we also have Blair's third attempt at filing a correct lawsuit where she still is incredibly vague because she doesn't have any facts to back up her claims. The more and more we look into this, the more I'm convinced that it is a possibility that Blair did actually sign Jeanette Braun as her attorney. I know I've seen a lot of jokes about that, right? Because this lawsuit has been completely baffling, but I think it could be possible. But yeah, without further ado, let's actually take a deep dive into the updates regarding this lawsuit. Now, before we get any further with the video, I just have two questions to ask you. Are you someone who enjoys playing mobile games? Are you someone who would like to be rewarded for playing said mobile games? If the answer is yes, then you will love today's sponsor, MistPlay. Now, MistPlay is a loyalty app with a large selection of games where the more you play these games, the more you can be rewarded with gift cards of your choice. And there really is a big selection of games from many different genres. You have puzzle games, adventure games, strategy games, and many more. Now, you might be wondering, how does the reward system work, right? Well, it's very simple. All you have to do is download one or multiple of the available games, and the more you play, the more points you earn. And once you have enough points, you can actually choose what gift card you want. This could be Amazon, PlayStation, Nintendo, and many more. Now, for me personally, I love a good puzzle game, so I've been playing Word Yahtzee, which is already something I find very enjoyable, but then it's an added bonus of actually being rewarded for playing. So if you're interested in trying out MistPlay for yourself, you can actually head to mistplay.com/Markie or click the link in the description to download for free. And as a little added bonus, you will get 200 points just for signing up, plus an additional 50 points for using my code MARKIE50 in the app. And I would just like to give a big thank you to MistPlay for sponsoring today's video, and without further ado, let's get back into it. Okay, let's start with Oz's motion to dismiss, where he says, plaintiff's amended complaint alleges a hodgepodge of jumbled facts relating to a personal and business relationship with defendant iilluminaughtii. Many of the alleged facts in the amended complaint appear to be irrelevant to the defamation and breach of contract claims. The claims that are asserted are sparse and not pled with sufficient factual information to constitute plausible claims for defamation per se or defamation per quote against defendant OZMedia by either plaintiff. Which in my opinion is a very fair thing to say. We've been through this lawsuit, right? We've looked at what's going on up until this point, and Blair's complaint has been incredibly vague. She basically keeps saying, OZMedia ruined my career, without actually saying why. And on top of that, and more importantly, doesn't say why what OZMedia has said is defamatory. He then goes on to say that Blair's amended complaint, her second go at this, is still incredibly vague, and she hasn't corrected the wrongdoings of her first complaint, and this is why in their opinion it should be dismissed. He also mentions that these alleged statements that Blair is saying Oz said that's ruined her career and that's defamatory. He says that these are incredibly vague and they're not verbatim, like they're not quotes, you know? Which is something you have to be very specific with, right? You can't say, oh, OZMedia's been defaming me on Twitter, and then not give the quote where he apparently defamed you. The last thing you want to be doing here is putting the court in a situation where they have to kind of work out what's being said, right? You need to put quotes, show them exactly what's being said. And basically carries on to say that the statement's incredibly vague, doesn't say like what was said, the context of what was said. She's basically just leaving it up to interpretation. And they end this motion to dismiss to say, look, she's already had a chance. In fact, she's had two chances now. She's amended the complaint and she's still been incredibly vague. She's not doing what she should be doing in this scenario. And because of this, she shouldn't be allowed a third go at this. It should be dismissed. Now, Blair and her attorney did respond to this motion to dismiss to say, under the standard of dismissal for failure to state a claim upon which relief can be granted, the court accepts every factual allegation in plaintiff's complaint as true and views the facts in the light most favourable to the plaintiff. Basically saying here you need to give the plaintiff the benefit of the doubt, which I guess is the thing that they do in court. But the problem is here is that she's had two goes at this and she's still not doing it correctly, which could be down to numerous things. You could criticise her attorney here and saying that they're not doing their job correctly, but also could just be the fact that what she's saying isn't true. Like, yeah, some of these scenarios might have happened that she's talking about, but she has to prove that it's defamation, and so far she hasn't been able to do that. And even in this response, she's trying to correct things to make them not vague, but it's still incredibly vague. Like, for example, she says, in or around the latter part of April of 2023, defendant OZMedia published a series of Twitter, now X, posts falsely claiming that Miss Blair had abused him. And then goes on to say that because of these claims she was receiving like threats and whatnot. But again, she doesn't say what the statement was that OZMedia said on X or Twitter. She's basically just asking the judge to take this at face value before, right? She's not putting in quotes like what was actually said. And then just to add to this, she references OZMedia's video called Let's Talk, an update on the Illuminati drama, and then goes on to say that in this publication, defendant speaks to how he believes that this video will be used in a courtroom and includes false allegations of theft and abuse. Again, not saying specifics. And this is exactly what Oz's motion to dismiss was based on, right? Blair keeps saying, oh, he said this, but doesn't actually say what he said. Like, the way she's saying it is basically trying to make the court do all the work, right? To figure out exactly what has been said. And again, on the topic of being vague, these false allegations have severely impacted plaintiffs' reputation in the YouTube community. Plaintiffs were well-respected documentarians, yeah, I'm sure you were, a reputation which is waning, if not at all, but destroyed due to defendant OZMedia's actions. I mean, in my personal opinion, it would probably be due to Blair's actions. But again, being vague, like, how did it ruin your reputation? And she tries to be less vague here, saying she will be able to establish a trial as she's lost thousands of followers on her YouTube channels. But again, doesn't actually say the number of followers she lost. She has no way to prove that it was because of this video. And from my point of view, and I can imagine your point of view, you know, anyone who's really been watching this story as it's been happening, we can sit here and say with confidence that the reason why Blair's losing a lot of followers isn't solely to do with OZMedia's video. She was losing a lot of followers before OZMedia's video came out. In fact, it actually came out pretty late in this story. And again, on top of that, we can say with confidence that we believe that Blair, the reason why she was losing all these followers, is because of her own actions. These people that she's trying to sue just spoke about their experience with Blair, and people kind of took that how they wanted to take it, right? And because of that, they decided they no longer wanted to follow Blair. Now, unless Blair can prove that these statements are 100% false and they were used in a malicious way to try and ruin her career, it doesn't really seem like she has a case from my point of view. Now, OZMedia again responds to this, kind of says similar stuff with like these statements being vague. Also says that plaintiff's response to the motion to dismiss cites outdated case law authorities, which is very funny because Blair's attorney is citing outdated case laws, something that you'd think that'd be really easy to avoid. And then basically finishes this response saying plaintiffs have already amended their complaint once, but have refused to cure its defects. Accordingly, the court should dismiss the entire amended complaint without leave to amend. Basically saying, look, she's already had a second crack at this, she's still not doing what was asked for, like, this should be dismissed, this is a waste of time. Now, the court did actually respond to this, and they're being very kind to Illuminati in this scenario. I mean, they do actually say, like, look, the amended complaint still isn't up to the standard we wanted. Before the court is defendant OZMedia's motion to dismiss. I reviewed the motion, the response, and the reply, and I'm familiar with the case file and applicable law. I also know that defendant, either Wonder or Felix, has more recently filed his own motion to dismiss. It appears to the court that the statements alleged to have been made by the defendant that plaintiffs contend are defamatory have not been pled with a sufficient specificity for the court to be able to review them and determine whether or not they are defamatory. Again, just saying like, look, you need to say some facts. Tell us exactly what you're talking about here. But for some reason, the court allow her to have another crack at this, which is baffling to me. They say, wherefore it is ordered within 14 days, plaintiff may file a second amended complaint. This obviously being her third complaint, it's a second amended complaint. And in true Illuminati fashion, she does file another amended complaint, but she does it a week late. The court gave her a 14-day deadline, and she didn't keep to it. Now, for some reason, they still accepted this, right? She has had every chance she possibly can do at doing this right. And still, if we're looking at this new complaint, there's still a lot of problems with it, in my opinion, but more importantly, in Mad Cat's opinion, an actual attorney. And she mentioned some new details that she didn't mention before. For example, she talked about a time where she was building a new home, and because Oz and Blair were on good terms, in the meantime, while this new home's getting built, Oz allowed Blair to stay around his house. And then she goes on to tell a story where she says, Blair had just undergone surgery and was actively taking narcotic painkillers. Therefore, her memory was limited during this period. Which is already an interesting start. She's saying that what she was about to tell, the story she's about to tell, she can't actually remember it. Because Blair believed she and Mr. OZMedia to be on good terms, he cared for her for a limited time to help her recover from surgery. During this period, defendant OZMedia told Miss Blair that he had taken a forbearance on his home loan and that if she did not provide him with 6 months of mortgage payments, she was going to be evicted from the house because the banks was going to foreclose his home. Miss Blair does not remember this episode, but her sister and friend were present who do. Okay, so what she is alleging here is that after her surgery, she was on these crazy painkillers. That means that she can't remember any of this. And because OZMedia knew this, he basically took advantage of that fact and made Blair agree to something that would involve her paying him 6 months of mortgage payments. She says that her sister and friend remember this, which I'm not sure how that would be enough evidence because it's her sister and her friend. But also just based on the fact that OZMedia had asked Blair for some money because she was living at his home isn't the most wild thing in the world, right? If someone's living at your home, they usually do have to pay rent, right? Put some money towards the bills. But she's trying to say that he like took advantage of the fact that she was on painkillers, which I think she would have a very hard time proving. After Blair had stopped taking these painkillers and regained her ability to retain memories, but can I just ask, like, if anyone in the comment section, can someone please tell me what these crazy painkillers were that, like, completely wipe your memory? I'm not trying to say that they don't exist, I'm just not familiar with them. Like, what painkillers cause your memory to be completely wiped? Defendant Oz stated that she had promised to provide this money, and feeling obliged based upon the fact that she had no recollection of the promise, did so. So she is saying that even though she didn't remember this conversation, she just paid it anyways and didn't dispute it at all, didn't try and have a conversation about it. I don't know, it just seems a bit weird to me. I just feel like it would be very easy to say, I mean, I don't remember that conversation because I was on these crazy painkillers. Let's have the conversation now. Let's work it out. So yeah, I don't know. This is just a very bizarre part of it, in my opinion, and in Mad Catter's opinion as well. Again, an attorney, he found this very sketchy. During this period, defendant OZMedia stopped caring for Miss Blair, and she was almost hospitalized because of this lack of care, which was previously administered. So she's basically blaming OZMedia for being almost hospitalized because of this lack of care. Which again, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but this seems very bizarre to me. Like, was OZMedia employed to take care of Blair in this scenario? Like, what's going on here? Like, the fact she's mentioned this in a lawsuit and put the blame completely on OZMedia because he didn't take care of her, it seems weird to me. She then goes on to talk about how she ended up moving out of Oz's home, found a new relationship. OZMedia then went on her computer and found these text messages from this like new partner of hers. And then also goes on to say that Oz told like a few people about this, like Blair's employee and Wonderstruck, saying that Blair had cheated on him. And then because of this says that Blair is under the information and belief that it was around this time all defendants began plotting to effectively ruin Miss Blair's business, reputation, and life. Again, a very vague statement. Like, how are you going to prove that these people were plotting to ruin your business, reputation, and life? How are you going to prove that? She then goes on to reference a tweet that OZMedia made and just sends a link to the tweet, doesn't actually quote it. And then she goes on to kind of mention more of the stuff that she mentioned before, but again, like, being very vague with this stuff, which is what she was meant to change. Like, that's what this amended complaint was supposed to be. She then goes on to talk about Wonderstruck and the whole car situation. And after she took the car back off Wonderstruck, she says that approximately 1 month after the above occurred, defendant Wonderstruck's father sent a demand letter seeking personal belongings from the vehicle, which I mean is a very fair thing to do. He gave a list of the things that was in that car that was taken by Blair that he never got back. It was a lot of expensive things. I believe there was like a PlayStation in there, like a monitor and whatnot. And she actually goes on to say that when she was unpacking his vehicle, and by the way, she never mentions like that the items were given back to Wonderstruck, but she says when she was unpacking the vehicle, she found documentation of Mr. Wonderstruck's intent to permanently relocate to Texas. Now, the reason why this is important information is because in their agreement that they signed for the car, Wonderstruck had to stay in the state that he lived in. And obviously one of Blair's reasons for taking the car back was that Wonderstruck went out of the state, he went to Texas. And she's actually saying here that she found documentation after taking the car back that Wonderstruck's intent was to permanently relocate to Texas. Now, Mad Catter actually says in his video that it's very important to say that this documentation, which she doesn't specify, she doesn't say what it is, but apparently this documentation proves his intent to relocate. He hadn't actually moved yet, which as Mad Catter says, doesn't go against the agreement because he hadn't moved yet. Now at this point in the complaint, she goes on to talk about the NDA that her employees had to sign. And basically in the NDA it says the parties agree that disclosure of pyramid information including but not limited to company history, operations, to include but not limited to an individual's employment or ownership, blah, 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 basically like not talking about private information within the company. Now, the reason she says this is because she then goes on to talk about how Felix the Kit Kat went against this NDA. Now, remember, the reason why Felix the Kit Kat is even involved in this in the first place is because he tweeted out a screenshot from a conversation with him and Blair, where Blair reached out to him, offered him to pay, I think it was like $200, to look through old footage that they had recorded and find a clip of the click saying a slur. Now, Blair's big complaint against Felix here is saying that he went against the company's NDA that he signed. But a big piece of information that she leaves out in this is that the conversation that Felix the Kit Kat showed happened before he was even employed, meaning he hadn't signed anything at this point. He didn't sign an NDA. So he was under no agreement at the time of this conversation. Now at this point, towards the end of the complaint, she goes on to talk about the actual damages that have happened here, okay? She's trying to be a bit more specific. And she actually says that her revenue dropped by more than 95% after OZMedia's video. She went from $47,000 in the period September 16th, 2022 to October 1st, 2022. And apparently that dropped to $2,300 during the same period a year later. But then she also goes on to blame Wonderstruck's video, saying that she went from $27,000 in the period of May 11th, 2022 to June 1st, 2022, all the way down to $10,000 during the same period a year later. And then goes on to blame Felix the Kit Kat, which might be the most laughable one out of these three, saying that her revenue actually dropped from $74,000 in the period November 23rd, 2022 to December 23rd, 2022 to $2,751 during that same period a year later. Now, the fact that she is trying to show that Felix's tweet had such a massive impact that her revenue dropped from 74 grand to 2 grand is mental. I mean, that's a powerful tweet if I've ever seen one. Fucking hell. Now, obviously, this doesn't make sense, right? You can't specifically put these numbers on the specific people because even just by your own logic, you're putting in 3 different people. But it's also not just these 3 people that spoke about you during the period that your revenue dropped. So many people spoke about you. So many YouTubers spoke about you. Some videos have millions and millions and millions of views. I'm assuming there's probably some videos out there speaking about Blair that have more views than maybe some of these videos I even mentioned in the lawsuit. And then even ignoring that, what's your responsibility in this, Blair, right? It's your actions that caused your revenue to drop. People just spoke about them. And again, I'm no lawyer, but I would imagine it would be incredibly hard to prove, maybe impossible, to try and prove that these 3 people were solely reliable for you losing this amount of money. But either way, that is the update up until this point. I would love to know your opinions on everything that we spoke about in today's video. It's still incredibly baffling to me. It doesn't seem like she has any case at all. Clearly, the court system's getting a bit impatient, you know, keep telling her to correct these things. I imagine that OZMedia is going to file another motion to dismiss. We don't know what the update is on that yet. But I mean, yeah, I just don't see how this can go on much longer. But what the fuck do I know? And again, I do just want to give full credit to Mad Catzer, okay? I know I said it a few times, but really, like, he is incredible with these type of videos. I would highly recommend checking out his channel and watching his videos. Like, you will not be disappointed. He knows a lot about this stuff. And yeah, either way, I'm going to leave the video there. Please subscribe, like the video, all that type of stuff. And until the next one, I'll see you guys in a bit. All right, goodbye.